Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I'm going to be helping moderate the meeting tonight and then also serving as the hearing officer in a little bit. So tonight's meeting, we are here to talk about a proposed air permit for Bell site development. We have a few things to go over before we get into more of the nitty-gritty of the meeting. So I want to get started because I know folks have probably a lot going on tonight, and maybe there's other places that you would rather be as well. So letting you know that your lines will be muted. We will be recording this meeting. So we record the meetings and then we do post them on our YouTube channel, EGLE's YouTube channel. Additionally, we will share a link to the recording with folks who joined us tonight after the meeting is over. Probably tomorrow or a little bit later on this week, depending on when that is ready. Oh, sorry about that. So one of the most important things is how do you ask a question tonight? I like to just kind of preemptively let people know that. I see we already have one question in our question and answer box. But as we go through the presentation tonight, maybe a question will pop into your head. Feel free to put that in there. You can either type that in using your question and answer box. When we get to the question and answer portion of the night, you'll be able to raise your hand and speak verbally. We did have someone who had called in. So for folks calling in, once we get to that question and answer portion, you will be able to pick #2 on your phone, and that will raise your hand so that we can unmute your line and you'll be able to ask your questions out loud. So I'll remind you of all of this a little bit later, but just wanted to lay the groundwork a little bit. So how will things work tonight? I'd like to probably go over this a couple of times. So we have the meeting is going to be in a couple different portions. The first portion of the evening, we're going to do a very short presentation about the proposed air permit and the proposed project. After that, we'll get right into question and answer session from you all with our panelists, which I will introduce them in just a couple minutes here. And then once we get to the end of the questions or 7 o'clock, whichever one comes first, depending on how many questions folks have, sometimes we run right up to 7. Sometimes we get done with the question and answer a little early. We'll jump right into that hearing portion. So the difference between the first and second portions is when we're in the question and answer, you all will be able to ask us some questions. We'll be able to provide answers to those questions. But once we get to the hearing portion, that's when we're going to be just taking comments on the record. So we won't be responding to anything that you might say. So I'll remind folks of this once we get to that hearing portion too. But I like to just let everybody know ahead of time. We do have some group norms for these meetings that we like to talk about. So these group norms were developed with our Flint air quality advocate groups. And it just helps us to make sure that the meeting goes smoothly and that we're all on the same page as we get started. So one of the main things that we want to do is we want to listen actively to with an ear to understanding. So we're going to be hopefully giving you this short presentation and hopefully it's informative and then you have some questions from it. So we definitely want you to ask questions and request clarification on anything that we might have mentioned. We want to make sure that we're criticizing ideas and not individuals as we go through the evening tonight. We want to make sure that we're communicating respectfully with each other, and that goes from us and from all of you as well. And then we want to take space and make space. And what that means is we just want to make sure anyone who has a question or a comment tonight gets an opportunity to voice those questions and those comments. Want to go over the agenda really quick here. I'm going to introduce my EGLE staff that we have here with us tonight. But the first person that I want to introduce is Chris Etheridge. So Chris Etheridge is one of our assistant division directors. And I know he's on as the decision maker tonight, so he's going to be listening in. But I know he wants to welcome everybody to the meeting. So Chris, whenever you're ready, just go right ahead.
Great. Thanks, Jen. And good evening, everyone. So as Jen mentioned, I am Chris Etheridge, one of the assistant division directors for EGLE's Air Quality Division. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us virtually this evening. I hope you're joining us from a cool spot. Tonight, we encourage you to ask questions, share your thoughts, and provide your comments on the proposed permit. So as the decision maker for this meeting, my role differs from that of the other EGLE staff you'll be hearing from tonight. I will not be participating in the discussion, but I will be paying close attention to the conversation. Engaging with the community members is a vital part of our work, The input we receive often leads to meaningful improvements in final actions taken by the department. So thank you once again for everyone joining us, and I'll pass it back to Jen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Appreciate it. So if my other panelists can turn your cameras on really quick, we'll just go through a short introduction. You'll hear from these folks a little bit later, and of course, they will be part of the panel as well. So one of the main people that you will be hearing from this evening is Ed Schleusner. Ed is our permit engineer for this project. So he's going to be doing that short presentation on what the company had requested from us and our evaluation of their application. We also have Mike Deppa. He is our toxicologist on this project. And then we have Joe Jaskowski, and Joe is the inspector for this facility. So he's up in our Warren district and is very familiar with the facility as well. A couple other folks that you might see their names on that attendee list there are Natalie Brown and Caitlin DeVries. These two are from our environmental support division, and they're going to be helping us out with sharing some information in the chat, links and things that you might find valuable as we go through the process tonight. And they're also going to be helping to make sure that our Zoom meeting runs well. So they are a very valuable part of this team as well. So Mike and Joe, you guys can go ahead and turn your cameras off if you want to. Ed, if you want and leave yours on, I'm going to pass you the mic in just a minute here, but I want to just again go through how the evening is going to run. So like I mentioned, we're here to talk about an air permit that was applied for by Bell Site Development. I know there's been some comments and questions about some things outside of air quality. So I just want to make sure folks know that we're happy to take those questions, but we won't be able to necessarily answer things that are outside the scope of our work. But we're happy to take those questions back to other EGLE staff and make sure folks get answers. So we will be kind of discussing that permit application. Ed will discuss his evaluation of the application. Joe is going to talk a little bit about what the inspector's role is. And then we'll get to that question and answer session. Once we get done with that, like I mentioned earlier, once questions are done or it's 7 o'clock, whichever comes earlier, we'll jump to that public hearing portion. And just as a reminder, the hearing is where we will take more comments on the record. We'll also talk about how other ways that you can submit an official comment. Tonight is not the only way you can do that. I know we have had quite a few folks that have been using our online comment system, the My Enviro portal, so really appreciative of that. We'll talk about some other ways that you can do that too. Some people don't feel comfortable making comments at public hearings like this, and that's completely acceptable. All your comments will weigh the same as we get ready to review those. We'll talk a little bit about where you can find other information and then how you can get a hold of Ed or Mike or Joe if you need to. All right. And then there we go. My computer's being a little bit slow tonight. So Ed, this is all you. I'm going to go ahead and pass you the microphone and you should be able to take away the presentation whenever you're ready.
All right, thanks, Jen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Schleusner, and I'm the lead permit engineer for the Bell Site Development air permit application. I worked with a team of air quality staff, including some of the folks on our panel, to review the application. Before we get into the details of the project, I would like to talk about what the Air Quality Division does and how the permitting process works. Air pollution comes from many different sources, including power plants, fuel burning vehicles, landfills, and various industrial sources. Our overall mission is to protect public health and the environment. We provide this protection by using our authority under state and federal laws through the regulation of industrial sources. Air Quality Division staff do a lot of different things, such as monitor levels of air pollutants, look at toxic air contaminants to make sure public health is protected, conduct inspections of facilities to make sure they comply with the rules and their permits, and review applications and write permits for sources of air pollutants to make sure the proposed projects comply with state and federal rules to protect public health. Part of our role is to regulate and permit industrial sources of air pollution, such as power plants, auto assembly plants, steel mills, boilers, and the facility we are here to talk about tonight. We do this by reviewing permit applications submitted by these industrial facilities. There are some things the draft permit does not cover and that we are not able to regulate. These include site selection and zoning, noise, and traffic on public roads. You will want to talk to your local government if you have questions or concerns about these issues. Our responsibility is to evaluate the project to ensure it meets all air quality rules that apply. If the project meets those rules, we are required to issue the air permit. To make sure a company is meeting all rules and regulations, we require them to have a permit to install for the equipment. From the time a company applies for a permit to when we publish the draft for public comment, air quality staff take part in the thorough evaluation of what the company is asking for. This process is highly detailed and often takes months to complete. First, the company decides they want to install, modify, or construct a source of air emissions. Then the company submits a permit application. The application is then reviewed by an engineer like myself to decide if their request can meet the state and federal air quality rules. During the review, other air quality staff are involved to help with different parts of the review, like the members on our panel. This includes the review of how the emissions may impact the surrounding community. If these rules are met, the engineer creates a draft permit. If public comment is required, as in this case, the draft permit is posted for the public to comment on. Public comment is a very important part of the permitting process, which is why we are talking with you tonight. Once the comment period ends, we evaluate all the comments submitted. The comments can lead to changes in the permit and the final decision. Finally, a decision is made on the permit application. This decision could be to approve the permit as written, approve the permit with changes, or to deny the permit. This decision is based on whether what the company wants to do can meet the air quality regulations. Now I will describe the Bell Site Development Facility, how it works, and how the proposed permit would modify this facility. Bell Site is proposing to add an additional non-metallic mineral crusher to their existing crushing equipment. The crusher will be used to crush materials like gravel, stone, and concrete. A water sprayer will be used to control dust. Now that we've talked about what Bell Site Development is requesting, let's talk about how we review a permit application. When reviewing a proposed project, the permit engineer works with other air quality staff. This review includes state and federal rules that apply to the project, evaluating the proposed air emissions against the rules that apply. This includes checking the emission calculations. We need to know if the proposed project meets these requirements. I'm going to talk in more detail about the different parts of the review in the coming slides. One of the most important things we do during our review of the application is look at what pollutants would be released and in what amounts. In this case, the pollutants are different sizes of particulate matter. Particulate matter can be solid particles or liquid droplets. My review included looking at larger particulate matter less than or equal to 10 microns in diameter, and particulate matter less than or equal to 2.5 microns in diameter. I have included the United States Environmental Protection Agency's depiction of particulate matter as it is compared to a human hair to help you see the difference in size. These air pollutants are regulated because they may cause health impacts. The left-hand column of the table lists the different sizes of particulate matter. The middle shows how much the facility might emit for each pollutant if the permit is issued, and the right column is showing what this project could emit on its own. The potential to emit is based on the worst-case emissions from the proposed project. For this type of process, the pollutants are released as fugitive emissions. Crushing operations are different than other types of industrial sources, like an automotive or power plant. The pollutants that are released are called fugitive emissions. What this means is that they do not exhaust through a stack. Instead, they are released and controlled at different processing points. This difference is the primary reason that having a robust nuisance minimization plan for fugitive dust is so important. The purpose of the plan is to lay out how the company must control dust from all of these locations. I will give you some more detailed information about the plan in some upcoming slides. Regarding the air pollutants, it is important to note that as evaluated, the particulate matter emissions would meet air quality rules and regulations. Having a plan is an important part of meeting those regulations. First, I'll talk about what a permit is, and then I will detail the specific conditions in this proposed permit. A permit is a legally enforceable document with a list of requirements called conditions the company must comply with. The requirements in the permit ensure the project operates as described in the application and the way it was reviewed by myself and the rest of the Air Quality Division permitting team. A permit has requirements such as emission limits, material limits, proper operating parameters for control devices and other equipment, testing and associated monitoring, record keeping, and reporting conditions. In this case, the draft permit also contains additional requirements to reduce fugitive dust. The proposed draft permit conditions include visible emission limits, which are set by federal regulation. Joe is going to talk about visible emissions and how they are evaluated later in the presentation. Visible emissions testing of the crushers, screens, stackers, wheel loaders, truck traffic, stockpiles, and drop or transfer points is required. Material limits, including a requirement that no asbestos tailings or waste materials containing asbestos can be processed through the crushing plant, and an unchanged limit on how much material per year can be processed through the crushing plant. Operational limits, including a requirement that no part of the process may operate unless the nuisance minimization plan for fugitive dust is implemented and maintained. As mentioned previously, all emissions from the site are considered fugitive because they are not captured and vented through a stack. Permits for crushers come with a plan to minimize fugitive dust. A typical fugitive dust plan includes requirements to apply a dust suppressant such as water to storage piles, roadways, and the plant yard as needed, as well as minimizing drop distances for material being transferred. The proposed permit has these as well as additional requirements, including rumble strips that will knock dust from the trucks before they enter public roadways, a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit, and additional record-keeping requirements that will assist the Air Quality Division with ensuring compliance and enforcement of the proposed permit conditions. Monitoring and record-keeping on a daily and monthly basis for both the amount of material processed by the crushers and visible emissions. Now that we've covered the permit application review, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. He is going to talk to you about visible emissions and what a district inspector does.
Thanks, Ed. Good evening. My name is Joe Jaskowski. I'm an AQD district inspector in the Warren office and the inspector for Bell Site Development. Part of my role is to determine if the company is operating in compliance with their permits as well as the state and federal regulations. We use all of these things to determine the company's compliance. During his presentation, Ed talked quite a bit about particulate matter and visible emissions. I want to talk to you about what we mean when we talk about visible emissions, or VEs. Visible emissions evaluations are a method for quantifying emissions from a facility or process. They are measured as a percentage of opacity, where 0% represents no visible emissions and 100% means complete opacity. As a certified reader, I would be looking at how much of the background is blocked or obscured by the dust. The permit limits are very low, and this is to help ensure no fugitive dust is leaving the property and impacting the neighbors. Next slide, please. During inspections of the facilities like this, I will verify the process is operated in the same fashion as during the emission test and check to see if the water sprayers are being used to limit dust. Obtain various monitoring data and operational parameters such as opacity. Review the company's records as required by the permit, such as keeping track of when they apply dust suppressant, when they're sweeping the roadways, and how often they're using the water, and regulations for compliance determination. In addition to normal inspections, I also conduct complaint investigations. If you're experiencing dust from the process at Bell site, I would encourage you to contact me or use our online complaint form. Thanks. Now I'd like to pass it back to Jen.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate you guys giving that overview. So as you might have guessed, we are now to that question and answer portion of the evening. So just to remind folks, if you have a question, you can type it into that chat question and answer box. I know we do have a couple of people that have called in, so a reminder for those folks, if you called in and you would like to ask your question verbally, that's totally fine. You just need to press #2 on your phone and that should raise your hand for us. So I just will give everybody a couple minutes here to see if we have any questions. Ed and Joe, you guys did a great job kind of walking through the process, the evaluation, I think emphasizing the parts of the permit that folks might actually be able to see when they're out there, things like that. Making sure that fugitive dust control plan is well implemented if the permit gets issued is going to be a real key to making sure that the emissions are as low as they can be. All right, so just looking at the questions here. So the question, this one's going to be for you, Joe. So Joe, Ed, and Mike, if you guys don't mind making sure your cameras are on for this panel part. And Joe, this question is going to be for you. So this is regarding your inspections. And the question is just, how often does EGLE monitor the site? So I know you have regular inspections that you do, and then any complaint investigations, you kind of talked about that, but maybe you could give us a little bit more detail.
Sure. Normally, I go out once a year. Bell site is on my list for a targeted inspection for this year, so I haven't been out there yet for that. But for complaint investigations, we do go out. I was out in March, I believe, for the complaint investigation. And then last year in November, when they were doing visible emissions testing, I was out there for that as well. So it kind of varies, but normally, once a year, they're inspected.
So one thing to mention about inspections, typically they're unannounced. So we don't call and give a heads up to the company that we're coming out. And then the other question related to that is what happens if a complaint is filed? So Joe, can you kind of talk about your process? I mean, it's going to depend on what the complaint entails, but let's say it was like a dust related complaint. Can you just talk a little bit about how your approach would be?
Sure. When I receive the complaint, I go out and investigate, and we have, I believe it's 10 working days to investigate the complaint. And depending on my schedule, I might not be able to go out as soon as I receive the complaint, but I try to go out as soon as possible. And while I'm there, if the equipment is running, I will see if there's any dust. If it's not, then I will maybe drive around some of the surrounding neighborhoods and take a look, see which way the wind is blowing, gather some information like that. And that's about it. If it is running, then yes, we would look at the equipment to measure the opacity to see if it is over the limit.
So stay unmuted. I got another one for you, Joe. So thanks for talking through that. I know the complaint process can be a little bit different, exactly like you mentioned. If you see something, it's going to lead to a little bit more investigation there. And I don't know if you know the answer to this one or not, but this question was regarding dust control during the winter time or times when it's cold out. The questioner said, there's not necessarily a water source at the site. So did the company give any indication of how they would be managing any dust issues, or would their fugitive dust plan change when it came to like winter months or when water might not be available?
Sure. Most crushers typically don't run in the winter because the crushing season is over with, because the road construction is kind of done for the year. But some sites, such as Bell, do have a water truck that they can use to hook up to the crusher to provide a source of water to limit the dust if they are doing any crushing operations.
Yeah, so they still have to abide by that plan regardless of what time of year it is. Yeah, so thank you for
Yes, sorry.
reiterating that. No, that's totally fine. No, appreciate that. Um, so this is a question that is going to be a little bit out of our wheelhouse, so I'll try to answer it as best I can. But Ed, I think if you have anything else you want to add after I chime in on it, that would be appreciated. So the question is, it's kind of a comment and a question. So they said, I've spoken at township meetings about how this site has caused asthma flare-ups for myself and other folks. Does that factor into this process at all? So and Mike Deppa, you might want to chime in on this as well. So when we look at the permit application process and think back about what Ed talked about when it came to the particulate emissions and what we are looking at during the permit application evaluation. So our role is to ensure that those meet the air quality regulations. Those air quality regulations are designed to protect public health. So in that, we kind of, it's not that we say, because someone has come to us and said, they're having some health issues, that changes the evaluation of the permit application. That evaluation goes forward as normal. So I don't know if you want to add. I think I might go to Mike first. Mike, do you have anything that you might want to add to that? And then Ed, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to add as well, but I appreciate that question for sure.
The issue of possibly having health effects due to particulate exposure is valid concern. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards for particulate matter were specifically designed to prevent such occurrences like exacerbation of asthma or cardiovascular conditions. But in this case, the emissions of particulate matter, specifically PM 2.5, are so low compared to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards that there is a reasonable certainty that no harm would occur, including asthma exacerbation. And I have a couple reasons why I can say that with certainty. But I don't know if this is the right time to get into that, Jen, but
yeah, I think it's okay if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Mike. I think that could be helpful.
Okay, well, so there's something in the national rules and regulations called a significant emission rate. We abbreviated SER. And this facility is quite a bit below the significant emission rate. And that significant emission rate is designed to sort of screen out sources of PM that have what we would call an insignificant impact on the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So, for PM 2.5, the NAC standard is 9 micrograms per cubic meter annual averaging time and 35 on a 24-hour average. The significant emission rate is set low enough so that permits that don't trigger that or go above that are thought not to emit enough to cause a health concern. And then I know this is probably not directly I'm sort of anticipating what somebody might be concerned about, and that's crystalline silica. Crystalline silica in this case is exempt from the permit review process, but we do take that into account. That crystalline silica is about 10% of these kind of crushing operations, and the screening level is lower than 9. It's 3 micrograms. And since 10% of the PM could be considered crystalline silica, as a high-end case, we we expect that, even if this facility emitted all the way up until 9 micrograms, the 10% of 9 would be like 0.9 micrograms. That would still be below our health based EGLE, protective for people with sensitive conditions such as asthma. I hope I didn't get too far into the weeds there, Jen.
No, thanks for talking through
questions,
that. No, that was good. I appreciate that. Yeah, Mike is our toxicologist, definitely helps with meetings like this. He does have a little bit more experience there, even though the rules are designed to be health-based, the screening levels are designed to be health-based, but we're not health professionals. So I appreciate Mike being on to be able to talk about that. Ed, do you have anything else you wanted to add on that? Otherwise, I have another question for you.
I think it's been covered pretty well.
Awesome. All right. So this question is for you. There's a couple questions that came in related to the asbestos portion. So could you talk about what the proposed permit would require as far as like testing what's coming in for asbestos, or how that's working, how that's being certified as, or not certified, but being documented as being asbestos free? What are we expecting the company to do there?
Sure. So there's not any specific testing requirements in the permit for asbestos. They are not allowed to crush anything containing asbestos. So I guess I can't speak to it more than that because that was not specifically part of the review.
So this sometimes, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this sometimes comes down to whether an inspector might expect or suspect, not expect, suspect, use the right word, Jennifer, that there is something that's asbestos containing. The questioner specifically mentioned concrete prior to 1970 that sometimes does have asbestos in it. That is a true statement. So if Joe would ever suspect that that would be happening, or that the company wasn't being truthful with their verification that it was asbestos free, then we could also request additional testing. So is that correct? Did I get that one right, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, a couple other questions here. I'm going to kind of put these two together because they're a little bit together. So and Joe, this one's going to be for you because I think this goes to your sort of inspection process. So one of the things that they are asking about is what happens to the dust that falls off on the rumble strips. And then just in general, dust that, it falls off or is pushed down on site. Do they do any sort of cleanup, or what is your expectation there from an inspection standpoint?
Yes, the rumble strips are supposed to be cleaned daily, and they're supposed to record when they clean the rumble strips. And yeah, if there was any dust on the yard, it's supposed to be watered to minimize the dust and to keep it down. But yeah, they are required to keep the rumble strips clean so that they help control the dust that is possibly coming off the tires.
And so along with just watering the process, are there requirements in the fugitive dust plan to also make sure that any piles that might be on site are also kept watered? I know one of the things that I thought I saw in there was the drop distance has to be minimized. So that is like the distance from the top of the conveyor to the top of the pile. If it's small, we're going to get less dust. If it's big, we're going to get more dust. So anything else that you can talk through related to that dust plan when it comes to like piles and things like that just might be on site?
Sure. Yes, you are correct. Right. The end of the conveyor, or stacker as it's called, is supposed to be as close to the pile as possible, and that limits the amount of dust that might be produced and blowing around. And yes, the piles are supposed to be kept wet, so that helps to limit the dust as well.
Yeah, thanks for talking through that. I know that the fugitive dust plan, I call it a fugitive dust plan. I know it has a little bit longer name, but I don't want to say the whole name every single time because it's quite long. But the um, that plan is quite robust. So that's one of the things, as Joe mentioned, if you're seeing dust coming off site or anything like that, definitely give him a call. We would want you to let us know that for sure. So this question, there's a couple questions in here that are going towards siting. So folks have mentioned schools, residents, things like that that are close by. So I know when Ed talked about this in the beginning, we just mentioned that, we aren't responsible, Air Quality Division at EGLE, for zoning, but one of the reasons why this facility had to come in and get this, we call this like a site-specific permit. They had to apply in a different way. They go through a much more rigorous review than someone who can get a general permit. So the general permit has what we call a setback requirement of a certain amount of feet from schools, things like that. And it's not quite as detailed of a permit. It's just kind of something that you can get as long as you meet the requirements. So this company, in this case, they had to come in because they couldn't meet those setback requirements, which means we do a more rigorous review. You're seeing a more robust fugitive dust plan, things like that. So Ed, I don't know if you want to talk any more about siting or anything that you might have looked at during the review process, but when it comes to why could this locate there in the first place, that's going to be something that the municipality would have made a decision on, and then we would have gotten the application. But I saw you come off mute, so please take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. So as Jen said, we have a general permit that has a somewhat less review required that does have a distance requirement. For the site-specific permit that we're discussing today, we issue quite a number of these on a regular basis. It does require a more in-depth review where we take a closer look at the emissions and the throughput and things like that. Based on the review of the emissions expected from this project, we can say that the national ambient air quality standards that Mike talked about earlier will continue to be met based on the potential emissions from this project. And because of that, we can say that there should be no concerns for public health.
Yeah, thanks for talking through that a little bit more. I appreciate that. This question is about a little bit about what you talked about, Mike, but it's probably going to be more of a Joe question because it's talking about visible emissions. So when we're talking about 3 milligrams of particulate matter, should we be able to see that? Should we not be able to see that? So the visible emissions aren't a direct measurement of micrograms in the air, that kind of thing. But the question was, should folks be calling anytime they see visible dust in the air or settled on the ground? So this does get to that, how these things are kind of linked together. So number one, Joe doesn't want to see visible emissions when he's out there, especially if he's doing an inspection or responding to a complaint. Visible emissions to the level that this facility is limited are very, very low. So there shouldn't be a lot. But the main reason why we regulate visible emissions and why we have a fugitive dust plan that is robust like this is to make sure that dust isn't getting off site. So on site, it's okay for it to settle down. We want it to stay on site within the site boundaries. So if you are seeing dust outside, then Joe would want you to give him a call. Correct, Joe, on that one?
Yes.
So that's going to be something that, we would definitely want Joe to come out and look at. Part of his process would likely be to say, is this dust something that could be related to this facility, and then be able to track things back through that complaint process and through that investigation. So I think I'm answering your question, but if you have more that you'd like clarified, please let us know. There's another question about this is another citing question. Oh, actually, let's get to this one. So, Mike, you talked about the SER, or the significant impact level, or emissions rate. Sorry, I did the same thing that you did. I heard you say SIL and SER. So we have a lot of acronyms sometimes in air quality, and they get jumbled up in my head. So you talked a little bit about this, but I might have you talk about it again. So can you define insignificant? So this was the significant emission rate that Mike was talking about. And it says the site processes materials that generates respirable crystalline silica. Some states like Washington have limits as low as 3 micrograms per meter cubed. Why does EGLE not consider studies that show there is essentially no safe limit for this type of crystalline silica, and enforce Rule 901 that prohibits injurious emissions, since the federal law only limits particulate matter? So I know you talked a little bit about that SER. Wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, and then maybe we can get into some of the other aspects of that question.
Uh, I'd push back a little bit on the statement that there's no level of safe exposure to crystalline silica. Crystalline silica, it falls squarely in what we call a toxic air contaminant that has a threshold of effects, and it's based on human studies where we've examined highly exposed individuals, such as workers, and we've extrapolated down to sensitive individuals like elderly or children, people with asthma, heart conditions, that the crystalline silica level would be it would be highly unlikely to cause harm. And the statistics, use what we call a 95th percentile, and we have uncertainty factors of 10 that we use to drive down what is essentially a no effect level to levels that would be safe for everybody, including sensitive subpopulations. I don't know if I answered the question directly, but
Well, I think it's good to talk a little bit about how those numbers are derived and how we look at that. So I appreciate you talking through that. We can definitely talk more on that if we need to. And then in this case, so the questioner brought up Rule 901 that prohibits injurious emissions. So again, the way we talked about this is, and what kind of can reiterate some of this, I mean, the intent of this permit, if it goes forward, and all the conditions in it are to ensure that that dust isn't leaving the property. And so that's where we don't need to enforce Rule 901, because that dust shouldn't be leaving the property. If for some reason it is, and Joe does an inspection or a complaint investigation and finds that it is, then that is a time where we could enact Rule 901. It's definitely something that's available, but it's not something that we would put in place preemptively in a case like this. This was a good question about dealing with the dust again. And Ed or Joe, either one of you, I can't remember off the top of my head, so I apologize, but is there any requirements in that fugitive dust plan to either cease operations or do something different when the wind is over a certain miles per hour? The asker specifically said 20, but I know I've seen them in other cases where it's been a little different than that. So I don't know, Ed, if you,
Yeah,
yes, thank you, came off mute,
I
so
can take
good.
that. Yep.
Perfect.
So the standard fugitive dust plan that I discussed a little bit in the presentation does not contain any kind of requirement for that. However, the enhanced fugitive dust plan that we've put in place in the proposed permit does in fact require a cease of operations when winds are at that 20 mph that you mentioned. So we
Okay.
do have a requirement for that in this proposed permit.
So as it is right now, the company's dust plan right now, it's not in there, but with this new permit, if it gets issued, it would be in there. Did I hear you correctly on that?
That's correct, Jen.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So there is a question here that says, if we have particulate matter that has been collected off-site, can we give EGLE this material for testing? So we really need to be the ones to collect that because we need to keep that chain of custody. So if, again, you are seeing dust from the facility off-site, definitely give Joe a call. Part of our investigative process can be to take samples if warranted. So unfortunately, we can't just take them from you, but we're definitely more than welcome, more than happy to come look at those and potentially take samples as well. Okay, I see what you're saying. So thank you for clarifying. So when the question came in about the wind and things like that, one of the main concerns is how can this robust fugitive dust plan be implemented properly if the water truck is not big enough? Or is there a requirement to make sure that they have water on site that is enough to actually keep that dust down? So there's just a concern that the watering trucks that have been out there or that might be out there aren't big enough to actually do the job. So I don't think that there's a requirement in the permit for a certain size, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct, Jen. We don't have specific requirements for how big of a water truck. We just require that it be watered appropriately. So if it's not being watered appropriately, that is not operating in accordance with the permit. So
Yeah,
I don't,
so no, that's true. That's exactly right. So again, that's where Joe would come in if things weren't being watered properly, dust was getting off site. We were seeing excess visible emissions at those release points. That's definitely something where as part of that dust plan. If it's not working, we can say, hey, it's not working and you need to do more or you need to do different. So our main goal is to ensure that that dust plan does its job, which is to make sure that dust isn't leaving the property. Yeah, so thank you very much for all these questions. These are great. Um, So the question was, could you please review the overall dust mitigation plan? So I know you talked through it. Do you have the it handy there, Ed, where you could talk a little bit through some of the more details on it? I know I'm just watching our time, but I think we have enough time if you wanted to talk through that a bit. But if you don't have it handy, we can obviously share it as well.
I'm muted, sorry.
No,
I
you're all
don't
right.
have it up in front of me. I do see that Caitlin posted the site for all the documents. One of those documents, if you click on that link, is the proposed permit. If you go to the very bottom of the permit, that is the fugitive dust plan. So you can take a look at all of the parts of the permit as well as the fugitive dust plan there.
Yeah, and we definitely have time after this hearing if and this is a great comment to have. So if you end up looking at the fugitive dust plan and you're like, I think they could do something different, or I think they could do something better, or I have an idea. I mean, that's a perfectly acceptable comment to say, I don't think that this fugitive dust plan is robust enough. If there's other things that should be included, that's a great comment to put in. That allows us to review that comment, figure out if we should be including that in that fugitive dust plan, if the permit is issued. So yeah, those are all great questions, all great things for us to include as comments as well. Okay, so these are great questions that you guys have. I really appreciate it. Sometimes we do have hearings and nobody has a question, so we always appreciate it when folks come to us with questions. Um, there's another question in here that says, why aren't we requiring the use of air monitors like what EPA recommended EGLE require for the Ajax facility? So I'll talk a little bit about that. If that's okay, then if Ed, you have anything else to add, please do. So for the Ajax plant, we didn't end up putting air monitors in there because there isn't a legal requirement or a legal way for us to do that. We are looking at this through the fugitive dust plan. That essentially is the thing that is going to make sure that the facility can meet the rules and regulations. It definitely is something we get asked about a lot. So we have a couple different air monitor ways we, monitor air quality in Michigan. We have our network, our air monitoring network, which is these kind of stationary air monitors around the state that are designed to look at the overall air quality. So recently, if you were aware of some of the wildfire smoke, some ozone issues that were in the area, that's where that air quality index comes from. It's directly from measurements from our air quality network around the state, and that's designed to make sure that residents in the state know when they should protect themselves from things like smoke or ozone. And then we do have some air sensors that we have around the state, and those are designed a little bit differently there to give us a little bit more of an idea of what air quality might be like in certain areas, but they're not used for regulatory things like our network is. So in this case, because we don't have that authority in our rules to do that, it's not something that we can add in the permit. But Ed, I don't know if I covered that well enough, or you have anything else you wanted to add on that.
Yeah, I think that was good, Jen. Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate that. Okay. Sorry, just reading these questions here. Oh yeah, that's a great question. So how close is EGLE's closest air quality monitor, since we were just talking about that? Caitlin, do you mind sharing the map of the air quality monitors and the dashboard in the chat? That would be really helpful. I don't know how far away it is off the top of my head, and unfortunately, we don't have a monitoring person on site right now, or on site on the panel. So we can definitely get back to you on that, but those maps might be helpful. I mean, it's easier for you to probably look at the map and kind of see, this is where I live, this is what is being measured close to me. So the question is, okay, so how do we make sure that they have enough water on site? And I know that this is clearly something that folks are concerned about. So thanks for bringing this up. Again, it might be something that you put in as a comment, and so we can further evaluate it. Like Ed mentioned, having enough water on site isn't something that is in the fugitive dust plan specifically, the amount of gallons or how big the truck can be. We just need to make sure that they have enough to ensure that they're keeping that dust down. So there's another question related to that. Are they allowed to take water from the wetlands? So again, that's something we can take that question back and find out, unless Joe, you happen to know because you're in the district there. But if you don't, we can definitely take that back to our water resources folks and make sure we get a answer for it.
I think this question came up before, and
Okay, sure, yeah, go for it.
I thought that I heard that they were allowed to take water from the pond to use for while they're using the crusher as their supply of water.
Okay. Yeah, and we can just get verification on that too. We'll talk to the folks there and make sure that that's something that is allowed and doable. And if you're interested, we can see if they have to have a permit or, something like that to be able to do that. So we definitely can do that. So Joe, this one is for you. The person's referencing a video of dust from earlier this month. So I don't know if you can just verify that you saw that or received it.
If it was sent in as a complaint, I'm not sure which video they're referring to. So yeah, I can't say for certain that I've seen it.
We can share your contact information, your email, and then if they can send it, that would work, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay, that sounds perfect. We will share that. We will share that contact information a little bit later in the night here. Okay. Yes. Okay. So that question was submitted for the hearing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. So one of the questions is whether or not we're concerned about fugitive emissions blowing off and accumulating in other areas like folks' yards, athletic fields, and then being kicked up. So again, we would definitely be concerned if that ended up happening. That's something that we would want to let Joe know about. We that wouldn't be okay under the permit. It would be definitely something that we would want to look into. And Joe, I don't know if have you had any complaints related to anything like that? Anything nearby the facility?
Not recently. The last complaint was in March. I believe it was like March 19th, maybe sometime around then.
Okay. All right, let me just look through some of the other questions, make sure we didn't miss any. Yeah, this is a great question. So are complaints logged and available for the public to view? So yes, they are logged. Because of personally identifiable information, they aren't just available through My Enviro portal. So My Enviro portal, for those who don't know, is the system that Ed referred to earlier. I know Caitlin's been sharing out some information about it too. So that's where we house all of our documents and things like that. So some things you can see and some things you can't. The complaints themselves could be available through FOIA, through the Freedom of Information Act, and then we would have to redact everyone's personally identifiable information. So that's why those aren't just available online. But yes, they are logged and you can get them through the Freedom of Information Act if that's something that you're interested in, but it just wouldn't have people's names and addresses and things like that on them. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions that we didn't go over. I see we're getting really close to time here. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing all that stuff out. You should be able to just cut and paste a lot of that information for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for being on the panel tonight. I appreciate you responding to all the questions that we've had. We've had a lot of good ones tonight. We're going to go ahead and shift over to that hearing portion. So Ed and Mike and Joe, thanks very much. Chris, if you want to get your camera turned on, and then we'll shift over to that other portion. So while Chris is getting ready, one of the things I want to talk about is public comments. So as I mentioned earlier, we've had quite a few comments that have come in through My Enviro portal through our online comment box. So really appreciate folks using that. Super helpful for us. But sometimes people want to know, what can I actually comment on? Like, what is a good comment? What is not a good comment? So you heard me mention, some of the things that we wouldn't be able to really evaluate in this permit application public comment period are things like the wetland stuff that folks were bringing up. So while we really appreciate you bringing those up, definitely something we can help get answers to. It's not something that we can evaluate as part of this permit application, but you're free to comment on anything. So a lot of times folks just want to comment in support or in opposition. That's fine to do. Again, that's one of those things, though, that doesn't come into play when we're making a decision or when Chris is making a decision about whether or not the permit can be issued. So things that are most likely to lead to changes are things that are focused on the content of those draft permit conditions. So things like that fugitive dust plan, like we talked about, if there's something that you feel is missing or wrong or anything like that, we really want you to send us a comment on it. Things that are related to like zoning, we heard mention here, folks were asking questions about, why can the company be there? So that's something that the local municipality would have made a decision on earlier before the company was allowed to site there. That would be, in some of their zoning regulations. So again, that's something that's outside of what we can handle. So we wouldn't be able to take it into account when we were making the decision. But again, we're happy to take note of that and want to just emphasize that folks are free to comment on anything that they would like to. All right, so now we're going to get into that. Oh, went a little too far, sorry. Into that public hearing portion. In order to open up the hearing, I have to read a kind of short opening statement. We've shortened it a lot. It used to be a lot longer, so I always just like to caveat that. And then we will get into the hearing portion. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this public hearing. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Jennifer Dixon, and I am with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, and I will be the hearing officer tonight. Chris Etheridge, Air Quality Assistant Division Director, is the decision maker for this permit application. He'll be listening to your comments this evening, and he'll be considering all comments before making a decision. This hearing is related to a request from Bell Site Development located at 5100 Waterford Road in Waterford Township, Michigan. The company is requesting to install and operate a non-metallic mineral crusher at their existing site. The Air Quality Division regulates sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts on public health and the environment. The law governing these responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Before the company can install and operate any new equipment, it must obtain a permit that meets the requirements of Michigan's air quality laws. This means the equipment must be capable of meeting state and federal emission standards, including health-based standards. The proposed permit must also contain conditions that include emission limits and specific ways of operating the equipment to ensure these standards are met. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to allow anyone interested in the proposed permit to provide information we can use in deciding whether to approve the permit or if there are additional issues to consider. The proposed permit is still a draft permit. This does not mean a decision has been made. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review of the proposal. We hope having the details of the draft permit will help you provide comments. Everything in the draft permit remains open for comment and further consideration, including whether the permit will be granted at all. As we review comments, we can only use the information you provide to make changes if it is within our authority. So, for example, comments about local zoning, truck traffic, and noise cannot be considered as part of the decision. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed project. We are happy to note your position, but please understand the department is by law not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed project. This hearing is being recorded and your comments will be part of the information we consider in making a decision. The public comment period began on May 15th and will end at midnight on June 30th, 2025. Additional comments or information may be submitted via written or verbal comment during this hearing by mail or by voicemail. After the public comment period closes, all written and verbal comments will be reviewed. All significant air quality related comments will be considered, at which point the decision maker makes a final decision. The decision maker may deny the permit, approve as drafted, or approve with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permit, if any, have been changed in the final permit and the reasons for the change. In all three scenarios, all interested parties, including everyone who was on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and or attended the public hearing, will be directly notified of the decision. The mailing will include a letter from the decision maker regarding the decision and, if applicable, the approved permit. Please recognize our staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed project and to listen to your comments. As a reminder, you do not need to comment tonight to have your comment be considered. You may submit a written comment at any time during the comment period by US Post or email, or you may call in a comment to the public comment voicemail. I'll now go over how to do that after the hearing. Sorry about that. Those who have joined us online can submit your comment in writing tonight by typing the word comment in your question box if you'd rather do that than speaking your comment out loud. Your out loud comments will be limited to about 3 minutes. So if you're speaking, I'll let you know when you have about 30 seconds or so left. I'll begin calling the names of people who have indicated they would like to make a verbal comment tonight. Once we get through the initial list, anyone else who would like to make a comment will be able to do so, even if you have not already indicated you would like to make a comment when you registered for the meeting. Okay, so another reminder on this. So we had a couple folks that indicated they wanted to make a comment, and that is Robert Velasquez and Mary Crate. And Mary, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. If you would still like to make a comment, you can go ahead and use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. That will lift you up to the top of the list and we'll be able to unmute your line so you can speak. You do not have to make a comment just because you said you wanted to, though, just to be clear. And then I'll just give those folks a second. So that was Robert Velasquez and Mary Crate, if you would still like to make a comment. And then the only thing that we ask that isn't in the hearing statement is that you state your name and any affiliation that you would like to mention for the record before starting your comment. So Mary, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and you should be able to unmute your line and go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Mary Crate. I am actually the president of the Waterford Education Association. I represent all 540 Waterford teachers. Currently, approximately 80 of those teachers are at Kettering High School, which backs up to this facility. We always say that our concern is that our working conditions are the students' learning conditions, and we've seen the dust on the teachers' cars. So we know that it's outside, whether it's getting in the school or not. That might be a different argument. Our concern is for all of our student athletes who are football players, cross country, track, lacrosse, baseball, softball, the marching band with all of their instruments, the color guard. We have students out there on a regular basis, and we're very concerned for their safety. And not sure how that impacts, because there's on a regular basis where the wind is over 20 miles an hour, and they are currently operating the facility that they are, the crusher that they already have, on a regular basis. And then looking at what they said tonight about the 5 mile an hour with the trucks, we already know that's not happening. So if you're going to continue with that, how do you make sure, if you're only monitoring the site, I guess once a year, you're going to be getting an awful lot of phone calls, because those trucks are not driving 5 miles an hour. They are operating when the wind is over 20 miles an hour. So very, very concerned for our students' health and all of that. So thank you very much.
Mary, thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate that. Robin McGregor, you are next on my list here. So Robin, if you can just make sure to state your name and any affiliation before you get started.
Yes, my name is Robin McGregor, and I'm a member of ECW. As a person that has been around in that area, we have watched this company not follow the rules. I would appreciate the most stringent air quality that we could have, because of our schools that are so close, because of the children in that neighborhood. We need them to have a future. So I really appreciate EGLE having this public hearing to hear us as the public. We're not all engineers that know what air quality should or should not be, or what to look for. And I hope that when we submit pictures or issues that are there as complaints, that it follows through, because a lot of the people are saying that they're not hearing back. I don't know if that's fact or fiction. I know that every time I've called, I have gotten feedback, but I know others said they have not. When you see a plume of dust moving across from the cement crushing business across the pond and going towards the high school, it's a very scary thought, because we do not know what's in that dust. We do not know what's going to make a difference. And I have a daughter that has severe asthma and allergies. Her father and I do not. So environmental issues do affect our children's health. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for hearing the public. I appreciate your time.
Robin, thank you so much for your comment. We really appreciate that. Elizabeth McGregor, you have your hand up. So if you would like to go ahead and just state your name for the record and any affiliation you have before you get started.
Hi, this is Elizabeth McGregor, and so I am particularly concerned because I do have asthma, and being over at individuals' houses that I'm friends with, I've had asthma flares, and I already said this during the Q&A, but I want to make sure it's on the record. I'm also aware of another individual coming to our township board meeting, and he had just been released from the hospital for pulmonary failure that appears to have been exacerbated by the dust coming off the site. So I am very concerned about that, and I just want to make sure that the individuals looking at these, excuse me, looking at this permit is is aware of that. And I also should say I cannot comment on behalf of the school board, but I am a member of the school board. And as Mary brought up, I am also very concerned about the students in our district and the exposure that they might have because of this. Because if I'm having an asthma trigger, they're clearly not meeting the requirements that they're supposed to be meeting according to their application and the permit. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate your comment. If anyone else would like to make a comment, again, just as a reminder, I know we have at least one person that's calling in. If you would like to make a comment, you can click that #2 on your phone. And anyone else who would like to make a comment, we're happy to let you do that. So just go ahead and use that raise hand icon or #2 on your phone, and we should be able to unmute your line so you can make your comment. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So Chris, I just want to see if you are okay with me closing the hearing before I do that. I'm talking very slow in case someone raises their hand.
Yes, I'm okay with it, Jen.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Just a very short statement to close the hearing, and then we've got a couple other things to go over, and then we'll let everyone go for tonight. So thank you again for taking the time to participate in this meeting tonight. We do appreciate it, and we greatly appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on June 30, 2025. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing will be notified of the final decision on this proposed permit. The hearing is now closed, so thank you again. Just a couple things to go over that I mentioned previously tonight. So if you didn't submit a verbal comment tonight and you have or have not already submitted a comment, we're happy to take your comment through My Enviro portal. That's the online system for us. Thank you, Caitlin. She is a Johnny on the spot tonight, so I really appreciate that. We do still take things just via mail. I like to say we'll take it on a napkin, post-it note. It doesn't really matter to us. We accept comments in a variety of ways, so you can feel free to mail that in as well. Email comments are also fine if you can't get in My Enviro portal or it feels a little overwhelming, which sometimes it even does to me. Good old-fashioned email with Bell site in the subject line would suffice as well. And then sometimes folks just want to call it and leave a voicemail. They'll write down what they want to say and then just read it to the voicemail. Again, perfectly acceptable way to do that. And then obviously we will be accepting those comments until June 30th. I'm sorry I'm stumbling over my words a lot tonight. I don't know if it's the heat or what, but I apologize for that. So where to find more information? I know Caitlin shared the My Enviro portal documents. That's going to be your easiest way to get to all the documents. Sometimes it can be confusing. What documents am I looking at here? Ed is great if you are looking for something and you can't find it or you're not sure what you're looking at, feel free to reach out to him as well. But we will be posting the meeting recordings up there. So Caitlin, you'll get a note from Caitlin in the next few days here, like I mentioned. What we're going to include in that is a link to the recording of this meeting in case you knew folks that had to leave early or you came in late or others that might be interested. We really encourage you to share. We'll include all these links that Caitlin has shared out in that email as well. There's also an online complaint form. So if you're not used to working in My Enviro portal, she'll share that as well, just so you have easy access, as well as the contact information for Ed and Joe that you're seeing here. So you'll get all that stuff in an email. So if you're feeling like you want to scramble to write it down, don't worry about that. In the next couple of days, you will get this information in your email box if we have an email. Now, if you are calling in and you would like stuff by email, feel free to give us a call. You can even leave a message on that comment voicemail, which is 517-284-0900. We're happy to add you to our list as well. And with that being said, we are going to go ahead and close the meeting out. So I'll just dilly-dally just a second here in case people are grabbing the links that Caitlin's been sharing in the chat. But we really do appreciate you all taking the time out to spend your evening with us. I know it, like Chris mentioned, I hope you all were sitting somewhere cool. And if you weren't, I hope you can get somewhere cool because it's still pretty steamy out. But other than that, greatly appreciate everybody joining in tonight. And Caitlin, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and end the meeting, I would appreciate that as well.